I want to take a moment to thank our esteemed moderators for today's session. Dr. Sushma M. Ma'am, Professor, Department of Pharmacology, Dr. Kamlesh T.N. Sir, Senior Resident, Department of Neurology, Dr. Suraj R.S. Sir, Junior Resident, Department of Physiology. Thank you so much for being here, and we really appreciate your time and guidance. The Journal Club meeting is an initiative where we critically analyze and discuss the research papers to gain a deeper understanding of the latest scientific discoveries. We are excited to introduce our presenter for today's session, Sakshi from second year, who will be discussing the research paper, Effect of Motor Imagery Based Brain Computer Interface on Upper Limb Function and Attention in Stroke Patients with Hemiplegia. It is a randomized control trial. Let's look forward to an engaging session. Over to you, Sakshi.
Thank you, Bharani. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
I hope my screen is visible as well.
Yes, it is.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sakshi, a student of second year MBBS, and I'll be doing the first journal club presentation of this year. I'll be presenting a paper published in BMC Neurology that explores the use of a motor imagery based brain computer interface in stroke rehabilitation. This study investigates its impact on both motor function and attention in patients with hemiplegia. I'll be critically analyzing the study, highlighting both its strengths and limitations, and discussing its implications in the clinical practice. Before diving into the study, here's the roadmap for today's presentation. I'll start with the background and the need for this study, followed by the objectives, methodology, results, discussion, and conclusion. And towards the end, I'll evaluate its strengths and limitations and discuss its potential future applications. Starting with the journal and the authors, this study was published in BMC Neurology, a well indexed open access journal with an impact factor of 2.2 as of 2023. It is peer reviewed and indexed in PubMed and Scopus, which indicates that this is a very credible platform. The study is authored by Liu et al. With equal contributions from Xiaolio Liu and Wendong Zhang. The affiliations of all the authors have been clearly mentioned in the paper as well. Next, moving on to the title. The title of the paper is clear, informative, and structured well, which covers all the essential elements of a good research title. We start with the population, which is the stroke patients with hemiplegia, the intervention, which is the motor imagery based BCI, the comparison, which is the conventional rehabilitation, the outcomes, which are the upper limb function and attention, as well as the study design, which is the randomized control trial. The only thing is that the time of the duration of the study hasn't been mentioned. So an alternative title would be the inclusion of 3 weeks as the duration of the study in the title. Moving on, next we look at the introduction and the need for the study. A stroke is a leading cause of disability worldwide, and up to 75% of stroke survivors experience upper limb motor dysfunction. This loss of motor function severely impacts daily living, reducing independence and placing a financial and emotional burden on families. And additionally, the attention deficits can slow down rehabilitation and recovery. So, this study has clearly emphasized on the importance and the need of the study, and this also helps in covering the knowledge gap, and the findings may add to the knowledge of the phenomena. And this also suggests a better rehabilitation protocol for hemiplegia, which helps by opening a new direction of research. So, when we look at the finer criteria of categories, which is feasible, interesting, novel, ethical, and relevant, we see that the study completes all of these criteria. Next, moving on, we look at the hypothesis. The study does not explicitly state a hypothesis, but we can infer two key assumptions. The first one is that MIBCI can enhance upper limb motor function and attention better than conventional rehabilitation. The second would be there is a correlation between motor function recovery and attention improvement. Both of these assumptions set the foundation for the study objectives as well as the methodology. Moving on to the objectives. This study does not explicitly define its objectives in a structured format, but they can be inferred from the methodology. Broadly, the study aims to, first of all, compare the motor function improvement using the FMAUE scale, as well as the Wolf Motor Function Test, as well as the modified Barthel Index, after 3 weeks of MIBCI versus conventional rehabilitation in stroke patients with hemiplegia. This is the primary objective. Next, we have the comparison of attention improvement using the Attention Network Test ANT, as well as SGT and SDMT in the same patient groups. And finally, they want to assess the correlation between motor function recovery and attention improvement following 3 weeks of rehabilitation. A well defined objective should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound, which is the SMART criteria. While the objectives here do meet these criteria, a more structured statement would have strengthened the study's clarity. Next, we move on to the overview of the methodology. A well designed methodology is crucial for generating any reliable and reproducible results. And as we can see, this study is a randomized controlled trial, which is the gold standard for any clinical research, and it is very appropriate for the objectives of the study. RCTs normally help in minimizing bias as well as providing high quality evidence. Next, we look at certain criteria which have been fulfilled by the study, which is the ethical clearance was taken beforehand before the commencement of the trial, as well as the trial was registered in the Chinese Clinical Trial Registry. The duration of the study period was clearly mentioned, which was from the September of 2021 to July 2022, as well as the study place and the setting was also mentioned. Moving on to the sample size calculation. The sample size was calculated as 60 patients, which is 30 per group. One group will be undergoing motor imagery based brain computer interface, and the other group will only be undergoing conventional rehabilitation. The authors have performed a sample size calculation based on prior studies, which adds credibility. However, the sample size is still small, and this does limit the generalizability. But the basis for the sample size, that is a calculation, is well justified and presented. Next, moving on to the things about the study sample. The possible confounders have been accounted for, as well as the sample demographics have been mentioned in the results, which we'll be looking at in a bit. The recruitment method was the patients admitted to the Department of Rehabilitation, and informed consent was obtained prior to the study commencement. As we mentioned, the small sample size does limit the generalizability of the study. Wherein the first time stroke was confirmed via a CT or a MRI, and the age range was clearly mentioned as 18 to 65, and it has to be within 1 month of the disease, which would limit our participants to the acute and the subacute phase. The hemiplegic side, as in the right side, was a dominant, and it was also the hemiplegic side. And the Brunstorm stage 3 to 5 for the upper limb, and stage 2 to 5 for the hand were also considered under the inclusion criteria. Coming to the cognitive abilities, the mini mental state examination MMSE score of more than or equal to 21 was considered inclusive, as well as the KVIQ 20 score of more than or equal to 55. These criteria ensure that patients had sufficient cognitive as well as motor function to participate in the MIBCI training effectively. Next, we have the exclusion criteria, which were listed specifically and clearly. The neurological impairments such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, or any severe cognitive deficits, such as with the MMSE score of less than 21 points, were excluded. Any musculoskeletal issues such as fractures, arthritis, joint replacements that could affect the upper limb movement, other than the stroke itself, are also excluded. Any other severe medical conditions such as visual or hearing impairment, intracranial metal implants, pacemakers, or an incomplete skull were also excluded. These exclusions ensure patient safety as well as they maintain the study integrity. Um, Moving on, we look at the methodology, that is the protocol. In brief, the participants were recruited as per the criteria, as well as informed consent was taken. Then the baseline recordings were done, which was followed by 3 weeks of rehabilitation. and then we have the post intervention assessments, and then the statistical analysis of the findings. In detail, as mentioned in the study, as we can see, 109 patients were assessed for eligibility, and then and then about 49 patients were excluded based on the exclusion criteria, and this was then followed by the randomization, and then they were allocated into two groups, which is the BCI group as well as the conventional rehabilitation group. The BCI group also received conventional rehabilitation, and then after follow up, as we can see, two people were lost to follow up in the BCI group, as well as two people were also lost to follow up in the conventional rehabilitation group. Finally, the analysis was done for the 30 participants initially, as in an intent to treat analysis was performed on both. In the conventional rehabilitation group, as there were two patients that were lost to follow up, the data had to be imputed. Coming to the protocol, the randomization used was the envelope randomization method, and this minimizes bias. The blinding was a single blind, that is only the assessor was blind. But ideally, a double blind study where both patients and assessors are blinded would reduce the bias further. But blinding patients to BCI therapy is practically impossible, and hence a single blind method in this study makes sense. The statistician was also blinded to the allocation, and each patient was assessed completely by the same assessor, that is pre and post intervention, which also reduces any assessor bias. And participants were blinded to the hypothesis, benefits, or risks of the treatments, which also further reduces any participant bias that we could have had. Coming to the intervention, both groups received conventional rehabilitation, but the experimental group had an additional MIBCI component, wherein the control group, that is the CR, had standard rehabilitation, which included motor therapy, occupational therapy, coordination exercises, and antispasticity training. But the BCI group had additional 20 minutes of MIBCI training per session, 5 times per week for 3 weeks. And the equipment that was used was an LSR A2 BCI system. And the process was that patients' imagined movements and EEG signals were processed by the BCI system, triggering functional electrical simulation if the correct imagery was detected. And for this, the patients needed a KVIQ score of more than or equal to 55 to ensure effective training. This intervention is innovative, but as we can see, 3 weeks is a relatively short duration to evaluate the long-term efficacy of the intervention. This is the pictorial representation of the protocol. As we can see, the patients need to wear a headset, and then they'll have to imagine any motor movements, and these EEG signals will then be recorded by the system. If these EEG signals reach a certain threshold, then the system will generate the FES signals, which will stimulate their muscles. Next, moving on to the motor function tests that were used. First, we have the fuel Mayer motor function of upper extremity scale, which is the FMAUE scale, and this will assess their movements on a 3 point scale, that is 0, 1, and 2. The maximum score that you can get on this scale is 66, and the higher your score is, the better it is. Next test that was used was the Wolf Motor Function Test, WMFT, which also assesses movements, but here there's a time limit of 120 seconds, and this is a 6 point scale from 0 to 5. The maximum score that you can get on this scale is 75, and again, the higher is better. Next, finally, we have the Modified Barthel Index, which is MBI. This measures functional independence of each of these movements, and this has a total of 10 components. The maximum score that you can get on the scale is 100, and the higher the score is, the better it is. Next, we look at the tests used to measure the attention of the participants. First up, we have the attention network test, which evaluates the alertness, orientation, and executive control. So there are three subcomponents of this test, and this is a completely computerized test. But the detailed protocol of this test was not provided, but it was cited. Next, we have the Schultz grid test, which was done on a smartphone, wherein there are 25 numbers in a grid, and they are scattered, and you need to tap them in the order, and the time that it takes you to complete the grid was recorded. Finally, we have the symbol digit modalities test, that is SDMT, wherein there are about 110 symbols, and each symbol is matched to a digit, and the symbols are jumbled. So you need to match the digit corresponding to that symbol, and the time limit in this is 90 seconds. So the number of symbols that you are able to match correctly would be your score. Coming to the study data, uh, the data was analyzed using standard statistical methods, and the variables were independent as well as dependent. The exposure was considered as independent, outcome was considered as dependent. The exposure, as we can see, was the MIBCI training combined with conventional rehabilitation in stroke patients with hemiplegia, whereas the outcome were the motor function parameters and the attention parameters. We have very clearly defined dependent as well as independent variables in this study, which is a very strong point. Coming to the analysis, software used was SPSS version 25.0, and tests used were chi-square test, which was for the categorical data, Mann-Whitney U test, which was for the continuous variables, as well as the Spearman correlation for any associations. A significance level of P of less than 0.05 was fixed. These methods are standard, but the study has not clearly explained the effect size calculation or how the missing data, which we saw in the conventional rehabilitation group, was handled or imputed. This could impact the result interpretation. Um, Overall, the methodology is clear, reproducible, and it is also aligned with the objectives. Next, we move on to the results. First, this table is of the baseline parameters that were measured before the intervention, and this also shows that both the groups, that is the BCI and the CR group, were age as well as sex matched. Next, this is the first table which shows the motor function results. We look at the first test, that is the FMA UE test. As we can clearly see, the MIBCI group showed a 8-point greater improvement compared to the control group, which resulted in the p value being less than 0.001. And this higher FMA UE score suggests better voluntary motor control. And the 8-point increase indicates a clinically significant improvement in the upper limb function of the BCI group. Next, we look at the WMFT score, wherein, as we can see, again, the MIBCI group had a greater improvement of 8 points compared to the control group, which again led to a P of less than 0.001. And WMFT, as we saw, measures the movement quality as well as the speed. And this improvement suggests that the patients in the MIBCI group can perform any daily activities with more efficiency. Finally, we look at the MBI test, wherein we can see that the MIBCI group has improved with 17 points more than the control group, which has again led to a P of less than 0.001. And this reflects the independence in the daily activities that the participants have. And it also indicates that the patients regain significant functional abilities. As we can see, all these tests have a very significant p value, which corresponds to the hypothesis of the study. We look at the attention function results in this study. First, we look at the attention network test, wherein we have the alert network response time improvement, which is 32.4 milliseconds, which has a p of less than 0.001, and the orienting network response improved by 5.6 milliseconds, which has a p of 0.01, and the executive control network response time reduced by 105.9 milliseconds, which has a p of 0.002. Now, all these three indicate that the faster response times have a better cognitive processing speed as well as attention control. Next, we look at the SDMT test, wherein the MIBCI group had a 8-point improvement, which led to a P of less than 0.001. And the interpretation here is that the processing speed and the improvement has suggests enhanced cognitive efficiency of the MIBCI group. And finally, we look at the Schultz grid test, wherein the time to complete the task was 19.7 seconds faster in the MIBCI group, which leads to a P of less than 0.001. And a faster completion time indicates improved sustained attention as well as mental flexibility. And the major strength of this study is that it is one of the first to demonstrate MIBCI's impact on cognitive recovery. And but the only drawback here is that the detailed training mechanism of MIBCI's effect on attention was not fully explored. One of the most interesting aspects of this study was the investigation of whether motor function improvement correlated with the attention improvement, and this table specifies that. As we can see, the FMA UE score correlated positively with improved alert network response time, wherein a P of less than 0.05 was seen. But the WMFT score correlated very weakly with the attention improvements, and the strongest correlation was found with the MBI score, suggesting that attention improvement directly contributed to better functional independence. This adds a novel perspective to stroke rehabilitation, showing that targeting cognitive function may enhance motor recovery. But the study does lack a mechanistic explanation for why some aspects of attention correlated more strongly than others. And this correlation was also explained with these pictographs. As we can clearly see, uh, the x-axis in this right graph has the FMA UE score improvement, and sorry, the y-axis has the FMA UE score improvement, and the x-axis has the orienting network response time change. The R of 0.241 suggests a very weak correlation between the two. But the graph on the right has the FMA UE score improvement as well as the response time change value, which has a R of 0.414, which is significantly higher and indicates a better correlation between the two. Finally, coming to the results, the results are presented in a very easily understandable form, and appropriate use of graphs and tables was used for data visualization. But box plots could have been used additionally. The results are based on direct observations from the study. The negative results were mentioned as well, which is a very big strength of the study, wherein the orienting network time versus the FMA UE correlation and the corrects number versus WMFT correlation were mentioned. And the estimated difference, that is the determination of effect size, was not clearly explained, as well as the protocol of imputation of the missing data was also not explained clearly. Coming to the discussion, the current study findings are in line with the existing literature, and the novelty, that is the significant motor improvement detected with less intensity and shorter duration of the training, is also a strength of the study. Correlation between motor functions and cognitive functions may vary in different phases and the severity of stroke. In depth exploration of the mutual facilitation of motor function and attention can help design individualized rehabilitation programs. And the MIBCI involves multisensory feedback, which may enhance neuroplasticity, and it also promotes the formation of the central nervous system and neuromuscular connections. Neuroplasticity as well as improves cognitive performance. It also strengthens the functional connectivity in the brain. And these findings are in line with prior research, but they also raise new questions about optimizing the MIBC for future use. Coming to the strengths of the study, Coming to the strengths of the study, the RCT, as we know, is a gold standard design, and the dual outcome measures, which are both the motor and the cognitive recovery, were also measured. The results were explained sufficiently, all observations were accounted for, and the comparison with previous studies was done. The discussion, as we mentioned, was in line with the study results, logical, and it was also coherent. The proper references were provided, and the objectives of the study were fulfilled. A few weaknesses and limitations of the study was that it was a very short term study that is only for the 3 weeks, and long term effects remain unknown. And a small sample size of only 60 people limits the generalizability. And this was also a single center study, and multi center trials are needed for more further validation. And one of the biggest drawbacks was there was a lack of neuroimaging data, wherein fMRI could have strengthened the findings by showing direct brain changes. To summarize the study's conclusions, MIBCI, when combined with conventional rehabilitation, enhances both motor function and attention in stroke patients. A significant correlation exists between motor recovery and cognitive improvement. MIBCI is a promising neurohabilitation tool, but further research is needed to optimize its protocols and assess long term efficacy. The conclusions are very well supported by the data. However, the study does not address the cost effectiveness, which is critical in a real world application. Um, Finally, coming to the implications and future directions. Clinical implications are it encourages integrated motor cognitive rehabilitation, and this also suggests that early neuroplasticity stimulation can improve outcomes. The research implications are larger multicenter trials are needed, as well as studies using fMRI could validate neural basis of the MIBCI benefits.
Time.
Effectiveness studies. Hello, am I audible? Should I continue?
Yes, you are audible. You can continue.
Yes, thank you. The research implications, as we were discussing about, whether cost effectiveness of the studies are needed to be required to determine real world feasibility. While the study opens new research avenues, it is just the beginning, and more robust evidence is needed before MIBCI can become a mainstream rehabilitation tool. Finally, to wrap up, we look at the strengths one more time. As we can see, this is an RCT, which is a high quality study design reducing bias. Comprehensive outcome measures, wherein assesses both motor and cognitive functions, were used. And the control group comparison has a clear distinction between intervention and the conventional therapy. Innovative technology, which is the pioneering use of BCI in stroke rehabilitation, was used. And objective assessments, wherein the standardized tests were used. Coming to the limitations, one of the biggest strengths of the study was that the limitations were mentioned by the authors, and the limitations were the medium and long term efficacy of MIBCI were not analyzed, as in the study period was very short and longer studies need to be done, as well as quantitative measures like fMRI could have been used. Single center and small sample size, wherein further studies with larger sample size and multiple centers can help improve the generalizability. Coming to the summary, finally, we evaluate the article on the basis of the finer criteria, which is feasible, interesting, novel, ethical, and relevant. As we can see, the study has completed all the five criteria, and the study has also added to the existing knowledge of benefits of MIBCI, which is a relatively novel technology and in motor and cognitive rehabilitation of stroke patients with hemiplegia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sakshi. That was a really good presentation. To add to the discussion, I'd now like to invite Dr. Kamlesh sir. Sir, can you please share your insights?
First of all, it's one of the best presentations I've ever seen on any review of journals. Very critically analyzed and very nicely presented. She has given her inputs along with whatever information that is there in the article, like giving information about what are the strengths of the study, limitations, and what could been done to improvise the literature of the presentation of the article like that. A very good presentation, Sakshi. I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
And it's a very interesting topic. You chose it by yourself, or somebody gave you the topic?
Sir, one of the physiology department PGs was had helped me in choosing the topic, sir.
Okay, good, 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 good. It's a nice topic, actually. No, I think let us ask audience, no, our students, any doubts they have, and then we can have discussion further. Rahul has a question, I think. Yes, Rahul. Okay. Honestly speaking, I don't have any practical experience of seeing a BCA machine. It is there in one of the rehab center in Bangalore. I think in Sakra Hospital it is there. They are trying that. I have not seen that directly. So whatever I have learned is that whenever a patient thinks about having a movement, the corresponding motor cortex will get activated. That is sensed by the computer. And as Sakshi mentioned, that whenever it reaches certain threshold, whatever electrodes that are stimulators that are placed over respective muscles which are required for that particular movement, like for example, right upper limb is paralyzed, that muscle will be stimulated so that the movement gets activated. So it is like creating a synchrony between your thinking process, activation of the motor cortex, and stimulation of the muscle simultaneously. So this is going to improvise the synchrony and then neural plasticity. Neural plasticity means establishing connection between the adjacent nerves and then strengthening of the motor response. So that's how it works actually, and it is very well designed in such a way that it just focuses on the motor cortex and then picks up the electrical activity. Just like how we record EEG, So in EEG also, whenever there is abnormal epileptic discharges, when it is picked up, so same way it is picked up in the brain computer, interface, and translated into motor activity. Yeah.
Now I would like to invite Dr. Suraj sir to share his view.
Hello, good evening, everybody. So, yes, the presentation was very nice, very well critically analyzed, just like as Kamlesh sir said. The analysis was very structured and detailed, thorough. So, that's a good thing. And if I can add a few points about how that BCI works, so I'll just talk about the technical aspects. I don't know the neurological aspects much. So technically what they do is how they actually detect that the brainwave is, if the motor act was imagined or not, is by calibrating every patient's EEG data just before the BCI training. Before every session, they will run a calibration session where they will ask the patient to actively imagine that movement, that specific movement, multiple times. And they will also take control EEGs. Like throughout the calibration process, EEG will be recorded. And whenever they ask the patient to imagine the movement, that will be marked as imagined movements. Now, a logistic regression model will be trained on that data such that it at least differentiates, uh, I think 60% or 80%, I don't know. I don't know how much the threshold was for this study. So basically, they train a logistic regression model which has to be able to differentiate between a non-imagined EEG and an imagined EEG with a 80% accuracy, let's say. I don't remember the exact number for this article, but yeah, there'll be a threshold. So once they have calibrated that, then they will start the training. And during the training, whenever the logistic EEG will be fed into the logistic regression model. So whenever the model says, yes, this is an imagined wave, I mean the correctly imagined motor action wave, then the functional electrical stimulation will be triggered. And the image on the screen will also move, giving them a visual feedback. So this kind of completes that circuit of imagining a movement, executing the movement, getting sensory feedback, and reinforcing that circuit. So that reinforces and strengthens their, it's like how motor training happens in young age. Developmental motor training also happens like that, the same way. And what else? I just wanted to, because I know stats, I just noticed all that. There were small inconsistencies in the tables themselves, but it's okay. That's a little too much of statistical analysis. But it's good to know how to interpret those tables, especially how to interpret 95% confidence intervals. Reliance on p-values is okay to some extent, but you should always look into the effect sizes and confidence intervals more than the p-values. Even if the p-value is 0.051, can we just say it is not significant? A hard boundary of 0.05 does not really give the right idea. Just because it is 0.49, it is significant, and 0.51 is not significant is not really logical, right? So that is why you should always see the effect sizes as well as confidence intervals. Okay.
Thank you, Suraj. It is a very useful information. I was not really aware of the BCA interface, the technical aspects behind that. Actually, thank you for making us learn.
Thank you, sir.
Good
Thank you.
input. Any questions, are there?
Thank you so much, sir. Now we'd love to hear from the audience. If you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to unmute yourself or drop them in the chat. Okay. If there are no further questions, let me take a moment to thank everyone. Your participation makes sessions like this.
One second,
Yes,
Bharani.
sir.
I just wanted to ask Sakshi. Sakshi, can we use this BCI in case of LMN paralysis, lower motor neuron paralysis?
Not really, sir, because the
Yeah.
BCI, as you can see, it uses
Hmm.
the EEG signals from the brain,
Hmm.
and lower motor neuron paralysis normally means that there's a problem with the spinal cord itself.
Yeah.
As far as I
Spinal
am
cord,
aware, to the best
and
of
need not be always spinal cord, anterior horn and distal aspects, like it can be a root, peripheral nerve, neuromuscular junction, muscle, like that.
yes, sir, yes,
Hmm.
sir, but
Hmm.
it doesn't normally involve the brain itself.
Yeah.
So, to the best of my knowledge, I don't
Hmm.
think we can, but I'm not
Hmm.
very sure, sir.
Yeah, actually, it is not possible as far as I know. Even I'm not sure whether they have tried in this thing, but technically and physiologically speaking, it is not possible to have that synchrony whenever there is element paralysis. Only in case of upper motor neuron lesions, especially stroke, we can use this. Yeah, I want all of you to remember one practical point, that a pyramidal tract lesion, upper motor neuron lesion, never causes paralysis of the muscle. Actually, it causes loss of skilled movements. Paralysis means no matter what you do, you can't move the limb. Whereas in case of pyramidal lesions, upper motor neural lesion, the muscle activity is still there. You can stimulate that muscle through the element nerve, but the skilled movements are lost. Best way to explain this is like in case of hemiplegia patient lying at home alone, and then if the house catches fire, they have the ability to get up and then move away from the site of fire and escape from that. May not be as fast as normal individual, but they can do that. But at rest, they will be paralyzed. Their upper limb, lower limb will be paralyzed. One side hemiplegia. They'll not be able to walk when they want to walk. But in case of emergency like that, they can walk. That means that there is a movement possibility. There is an entity called phenomena of pandiculation. I don't know whether you have heard this phenomena of pandiculation. One of you give example of pandiculation? Suraj, do you have any idea about this?
No, sir. Actually, I'm hearing it for the first time. Sorry.
Pandiculation. See, normally whenever we are fatigued, we yawn. No? When we yawn, why do we yawn actually in case of fatigue? During yawning, we exhale more. No, we throw out all the carbon dioxide that is accumulated in the body due to fatigue. So it's a protective mechanism to avoid buildup of carbon dioxide. So when we yawn, our arms will abduct and then our arm will come near the face like that. It's a reflex movement which happens. That's one of the example for yawning. I mean, pandiculation phenomena. This can happen in stroke patients. If a patient has got a right hemiplegia, right upper limb weakness, during yawning, their hand will actually abduct and flex at the elbow, imitating like a yawning. I mean, the normal movement which is seen in yawning actually. So that is a best example for phenomenon of pandiculation. That says that in case of human lesion, pyramidal lesion, there is no paralysis; it's just loss of skilled movements. So there is a terminology for that. Exact wordings I don't remember. Parakinesia brachialis. You can read about it. Parakinesia brachialis. It's a paradoxical movement that is seen in a paralyzed limb.
Oh, okay, sir. Nice.
Yes, sir. We'll definitely read about that.
Yeah.
If there are are there any other further questions from the audience? Okay. If there are no further questions, where I like to take a moment to thank everyone. Thank you so much, Kamlesh sir and Suraj sir, for joining the meeting and giving your insights. We hope this discussion was informative and thought-provoking. Let's continue learning and growing together through this journal club meetings. Thank you once again for joining us today. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.